Well, now for more reaction to the sad news of Kayla Muller's death, let's bring in David Gartenstein-Ross, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. A big question now, David, is what are we going to do about this? What should we do about this?
That's an excellent question. I think that there's a number of things that the U.S. should be doing to escalate ISIS's decline. The group has already been in a decline phase for a number of months now because the aerial campaign has inflicted significant attrition upon it. And beyond that, it's also lost not only heavy armor and forces, but also it's been losing financial assets. But some of the things the U.S. can do are, number one, put more special operations forces on the ground there. Secondly, it can increase the amount of engagement with tribal leaders. Last time when al-Qaeda in Iraq was defeated during the Iraqi Civil War, when the U.S. played a heavy role, the tribes, particularly Sunni tribes, were quite important. And another thing the U.S. can do is change its targeting from senior leaders of the group to more tactical leaders in order to hasten the kind of attrition on ISIS's ranks.
David, you were among those who were skeptical when this news first came out. When ISIS claimed that Kayla was killed in an airstrike by Jordan, we still do not know the circumstances around her death. I'm curious what you think now, because you've called ISIS a master of propaganda, and they certainly have used the death of Americans as propaganda on their behalf. But this seems different than the videos of beheadings that they've released. So what do you make of this news coming out today, the way in which it was telegraphed not only to the family, but now to the world audience? What do you think that says about the group?
Well, at the time when I expressed skepticism, I said two things. One was that I wasn't skeptical that she was dead. I held out hope, as we should, but I thought it was likely that she was dead. It's the way that they claimed that she had died in a Jordanian airstrike just when Jordan had ramped up its attacks that I was skeptical of, and I remain very skeptical because that's a little bit too simple. It solved a problem that ISIS had. They've never executed a Western female hostage on camera, and so how do they deal with Kayla Muller is a problem that they had. Executing a Western woman, even for an organization that's so high on killing people and broadcasting their deaths, is something that wouldn't necessarily have sat well with its army of supporters and its army of constituents. In this case, we don't know precisely why the Obama administration and Kayla Muller's family became convinced that she was dead. They said that there was some kind of proof that they had been given that the intelligence community was able to confirm. This has been a much quieter death, one which, rather than ISIS being the agent of her death, ISIS is claiming that it was Jordan that did so, something that's designed, among other things, to demoralize Jordan for its escalating airstrike campaign and to cause a wedge between the U.S. and Jordan.
And thank you for that clarification. That is what we were also reporting on the air, was the skepticism surrounding the details that ISIS was saying about her death. And obviously still a lot to learn, and we'll see if we actually do learn any more specifics. David, I would like to read just a little bit of Secretary Kerry's statement on Kayla's death. And this is the final lines of his statement. He says, ISIL and ISIL alone is the reason Kayla is gone. Like our friends in Jordan, our resolve is unshaken to defeat this vile and unspeakable ugly insult to the civilized world and to defeat terrorists whose actions include killing women, killing children, burning people alive, are an insult to the religion they falsely claim to represent. So Secretary Kerry obviously talking about the death of Kayla, the death of others as well. We've received these reports from the UN of ISIS beheading children, crucifying children, not only of religious minorities, but Muslim children as well. And in your answer to the last question, saying that the execution of a Western woman would really be frowned on in many circles of even supporters of ISIS, do you think that they're crossing into a territory of no return, that this is indeed the tipping point that many have talked about that will evoke real change and eventually their defeat?
I don't think that this is the tipping point in kind of a standard causal way. I think in other ways they're actually beyond the tipping point, though, and this is one more step in that regard. ISIS embraced a strategy that their predecessor organization had embraced. They were born out of al-Qaeda in Iraq, and al-Qaeda in Iraq was known for doing what ISIS does. It was an incredibly brutal organization, even by jihadist standards. Not as brutal as ISIS, but it also would behead captives on camera. And al-Qaeda's central leadership, similar to its relationship with ISIS, was upset about that. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who was then the deputy emir of al-Qaeda, wrote the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq a letter saying, why is it that you don't just shoot your captives? It would accomplish the same thing without looking so bloodthirsty. Now, ISIS has not only been inflicting brutality, but it's been inflicting brutality which, even by their own extreme interpretation of Sharia law or Islamic law, is a transgression. And so this builds weakness, vulnerability, and fragility into the organization.
So, David, let me ask you a question on that, though. Because they use such violence and force, is the only way to counter them by equal violence and force?
No, not by equal violence and force. I mean, I think it's an organization that can't be dislodged except by the use of force, because they're entrenched in a number of different areas. And I think it'll be fairly broad-based force, not just airstrikes, but also will require local uprisings, of which we see some signs. But when we talk about equal violence and force, we're talking about, for example, people beheading ISIS members.
And that's obviously not what we're inferring. But what the big question has been whether or not the use of force has to be used here because of the violence and brutality of the group. That perhaps it's the only way to counter them is by meeting them on their battlefields. And that's been a big question for many policymakers.
Well, I think the answer is yes. I mean, the use of force is necessary against them. And the U.S. and other countries are using force against them right now. That's what the Ariel campaign is about. I think that's actually a very easy question. When you have an organization that's literally committing genocide, enslaving women, and burning people alive, it's difficult to deal with it by anything but fighting it.
And they've been doing it for months and months and months and months. And a big question about when we'll do something different ourselves. David, thank you for your insights. We always appreciate it very much. A big story we'll continue to watch today, and more developments as we get them, we'll bring those to our viewers. John?